something to give you an idea about what we'll be talking about in another presentation that is paid for. Okay, you know, everybody's got to eat, and so for a fee, you can get the other presentations that goes into all of the stuff we're talking about. But this presentation is just to talk about sovereignty, and the other presentation talks about how you can assert your sovereignty. Okay, it's a procedure that I developed, but it's really not that complicated, and really it's common law, and so anybody can develop it. It's not that difficult, but it's something that I developed by trial and error, and it's something that has worked to the point that the Texas Department of Public Safety told me that I am listed in their system as sovereign. And so I know it's worked. And so that's what the other part of the presentation will be. That's not stuff that we'll talk about today. Today we're going to talk about who you are. Do you know who you are? A sovereign is exempt from suit, not from any formal conception or obsolete theory, but on the logical and practical ground there can be no legal right as against the authority which makes the law on which the right depends. In other words, the government exists by my authority. They have no right to sue me. Okay, that's exactly what that's saying. Think about it. They exist because I created them. They have no right to sue me, and nobody can sue me using the government's courts. Okay, they're my courts. And so a sovereign cannot be sued in his own court, and there's court cases to talk about that. And so, again, do you know who you are? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. This is a Declaration of Independence. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the operative word here is unalienable. That means cannot be alienated under any circumstances. Now, you know, these foreign agents of the Crown, they call bar members, that make up most of these law dictionaries. If you go into any law dictionary I've ever seen, you look up the word unalienable, and it'll tell you to go to see inalienable, and then under inalienable it says that your rights can be alienated by way of some contract. And if your rights are inalienable, then yes, they probably can be. But my rights are not inalienable, and I don't care what that law dictionary says. My rights are unalienable, and the courts have said that, and so has the positive law embodied in the Declaration of Independence, and so has attorneys, okay, government attorneys. When I assert myself, and when I drag their butt into court, that's what they say too, because they say there is no contract, it's a nullity. Okay, so that means my rights are unalienable, and they know it. This is a Canadian court case. This is talking about the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we not say that it was conducted between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract but resembles a treaty, concluded between two nations, in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. Now, think about that. Think about what they're saying here. Okay, essentially what they said is the barons stuck a sword to his throat and said, "Here, king, we want you to sign this." And so that's my point, okay? At that point in time, the people of England were sovereign too, okay? They knew who they were. And then over time, because of colorable laws and things like that that were passed, that really don't apply to anybody, okay? And I'm going to show you some in this presentation and more in the other presentation that is paid for. The colorable laws that are passed really don't apply to anybody, and when we get involved in them, then what happens is the courts view it to be a contract. You're supposed to know the law. So therefore, you've agreed to it. But all you got to do is bring up and say, hey, I'm the king, and you just watch them scatter. It's amazing how that works. It's like turning the lights on and seeing the roaches scatter. Okay, allegiance. Do you think that you have allegiance to, like they have the Pledge of Allegiance? You pledge allegiance? That's for persons. I'm not a person, and I can show you court cases to talk about it. But anyways, the president has an oath of office. We, the people, owe no allegiance to the president. The president owes allegiance to we, the people. That's why he's got the oath of office. That's why I don't have an oath of office. He owes me allegiance. And I don't mind saying that, that I have some allegiance to America, but really I don't. I don't have a shred of allegiance. They have allegiance to me. All of my public servants have an oath of office to protect my rights. And they better. There is in our political system a government of each of the several states and a government of the United States. Each is distinct from the other and has citizens of its own. Did you know there's two classes of citizens? One may be a citizen of a state and yet not a citizen of the United States. There is a clear distinction between national citizenship and state citizenship. Did you know there's two classes of citizens? You can actually, it says here, you can be a citizen of a state without being a citizen of the United States. Do you know who you are? Most people think they're U.S. citizens. I can show you that a U.S. citizen is a slave, and we're going to go through that. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. Gee, that's interesting. Citizenship of the United States does not entitle citizens to privileges and immunities as citizens of the state, since privileges of one are not the same as the other. Do you know who you are? The privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States do not necessarily include all the rights protected by the first 8 amendments of the federal Constitution against the powers of the federal government. Did you know that? U.S. citizens don't have access to the first 8 amendments against the powers of the federal government. The only absolute and unqualified right of a U.S. citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. Did you know that? That's the only right. All the rest of them that U.S. citizens have are granted by Congress. Think about it. That's what the Civil Rights Act does. And we're going to talk about that in this other presentation about civil rights versus unalienable rights and what the courts have said about that as well. Do you know who you are? There are at least 2 major classes of citizens, state and federal. And depending on what you tell them will determine whether you're a slave or whether you're free. A federal citizen is nothing more than a slave. You can be a national. I don't even like talking about citizenship, quite frankly. I like nationality because nationality is common law. And citizenship is too close to being political. And that's all in the matrix, for lack of a better word. But the U.S. passport application talks about a non-citizen national. And here it is where you swear in a penalty, perjury, that I am a U.S. citizen or non-citizen national. Okay, and if you read in the passport, it says, the Secretary of State hereby requests all to whom it may concern to give all lawful aid and assistance to the U.S. citizen / national named herein. Okay, so are you a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen national? I like to tell them I'm just an American national. And here it is again in the privacy statement for the U.S. passport application. It is, however, true in all common law countries, has always and consistently been held that the wife and minor children take the nationality of the husband and father. That is common law doctrine, okay? Nationality is because of common law. Why do we, the people, set up governments for in the first place? Well, think about it. Protection against foreign enemies, right? That's what the legitimate function of the government. Protection from each other, so I don't go and shoot somebody or somebody doesn't come and shoot me without having consequences. And to administer disputes in a fair and impartial manner. If I go and cause some damage to the neighbor, he's got some way to go, somewhere to go to get it resolved. And that's the only legitimate function for government, is to protect the rights of the people.